This happened about 2.5 years ago, in the winter of 2017 and early 2018. My partner and I, both female and female, 21 and 25, were living in the center of a popular and busy city in England at the time, in a ground floor flat. The street we lived on was just off a very busy road that had about 1,000 pubs on it, so it was normally quite populated at all hours, most days. The flat we lived in was one of about 7 in an old converted bakery. There was a very large, locked wooden gate with a buzzer, and the flats were all in the courtyard behind the gate. We shared the flat with my mom. Our bedroom windows both faced directly onto the street, where people would walk past on the pavement. On this given night, it must have been around 2 a.m., my girlfriend and I were laying in my bed watching films on my laptop. My bedroom was a tiny shoebox-sized room with a bed and a wardrobe, and about 5 square feet of extra floor space. Tiny. My window was right next to my bed and faced out onto the street. As we were laying on my bed, someone knocked on my window. That wasn't unusual, as I had quite a few friends that lived and worked near my flat, so we didn't think much of it. We continued watching our film and settled down. About half an hour to 45 minutes later, there is a massive bang on my window that sounded like someone slammed their fist against it and ran off. We were a bit startled and decided to go take a look outside, as it was evidently not one of my friends at this point. We went into the courtyard and opened the main gate, and couldn't see anyone on the street at all. It was freezing and snowing, but still unusually quiet. We stood there for about 5 minutes, just looking around. I noticed a man on the other side of the street wearing a mid-length trench coat and heavy boots. Just as my eyesight is awful and I never wear my glasses, I didn't see any discerning features. He was on the opposite side of the street and was walking along the street from the main road, from left to right, up towards our flat. I got a bit of a strange vibe from him and pointed him out to my girlfriend. We both just stood and watched for a few minutes, and as he passed, he didn't turn to look at us or anything. After less than a minute, I looked to my right and saw that this same guy had now crossed over to our side of the street, and he was walking towards us. My girlfriend and I watched him for a minute, and then proceeded to panic and shut ourselves behind the gate. Instead of going back into our flat, we crouched down out of sight so we could watch through the gap under the gate to see if he passed by. The thing I remember the most vividly is the sound of his boots creaking on the snow, and watching him come to a dead stop directly outside the gate. My girlfriend and I were both now suitably shitting ourselves, and we quietly hurried back inside. Our flat had an open-plan kitchen and living room, with a door that led into the straight hallway. My bedroom was right at the end of the hallway, and my mom's was off to the right. All of the lights were off, and I poked my head into the hall, as I had a clear line of sight into my bedroom from there. When I looked, I could see the silhouette of this man pacing up and down, slowly outside my bedroom window. My mom had slept soundly through all of this, but I decided to go in and wake her up to let her know what was going on. She brushed it off until I told her to look outside, and she saw this man now pacing back and forth outside her window and mine. Knowing that at the right angle, you could see through my blinds from outside, I pressed myself up against the wall and scooted my way down the hallway back to the living room, and I rang the police. My girlfriend and I weren't really sure what to make of the situation, but it felt pretty ominous. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, and they met me outside. They said they found him and he claimed to be homeless, looking for a place to stay, but that he was very well dressed and clean-shaven, and had no other possessions with him. The police officer offered forth the fact that it's more likely he was intrigued by the fact that we were 2 young females in bed together, and he was having a little snoop. The next day, I was outside having a cigarette with my girlfriend, and I noticed a very prominent, sticky handprint on my window, as if someone had their hand pressed up against it, looking in. No thank you. My girlfriend swears that she saw him at the train station just a few months later. When I was a teenager, my older brother moved out and my parents both worked late. So occasionally, I would spend evenings by myself after school. We lived in the countryside a few miles outside of town and had a good collection of neighbors. The day went as normally as ever. I went to school, got home, turned on the TV. I had a snack and texted one of my friends who I had a crush on. It wasn't long afterward that I noticed a man outside my house. He walked past a few times. He wasn't an ordinary person walking around the block. He looked scraggly and unkempt. I ducked as far as I could behind the chair, still trying to see him out the living room windows, hoping that he didn't see me. But soon he came to the front door and he knocked. I was texting my friend the entire time, increasingly getting freaked out. As he knocked on the door, I stupidly went to answer. I had my phone on me with 911 at the ready. I tried to silently unlock the door to not alert the man. I opened the door a crack. There is a screen door separating myself and the man. I was ready to slam the door and lock it if anything happened. The man looked at me with crazed, paranoid eyes. He had a large dark beard and looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s. He seemed out of breath and his face drenched with sweat. He was larger too, more the reason to keep my guard. I sheepishly said, "Hello?" "Please, call the police, they're after me," he said in an exhausted smoker voice. He kept looking at the road and tensed whenever a car would occasionally pass. "Who's after you?" I asked, getting ready to slam the door. "I barely escaped, they were right behind me, please. Can I come inside?" At this, I knew to call the police. "Just wait here, I'll get someone to help." My heart was in my throat at this time. I didn't know if this guy was then going to try to force open the door, so I quickly shut it and locked it. I ran to the back door and locked that as well as I called 911. My heart was racing and I could barely tell the operator my information, but they said that they would send somebody out. It wasn't long until a patrol car arrived, but it felt like forever. The entire time, I kept watching the man who then walked into my driveway, pacing nervously. The officer got out and proceeded to talk with the man and then got in the car and left. I had no idea what happened to him, nor if he was telling the truth. He could have been drunk or crazy, but it was a genuine fear in his eyes when I looked at him. Something truly scared him, and it scared me to think that there could be someone out there that wanted people for whatever reason. So, for the crazed scared man and whoever he was running from, let's not meet. Hey, for the record, I'm a female. I'm turning 19 this year and the story happened when I was 15. Oh, and also I am from France, which can explain my English mistakes if there are any. When I was 15 years old, I just got into junior year. I created my first Twitter account that I deleted because of this story. Some information. I didn't tell anyone my username, neither my family nor my friends, because I didn't have any. My profile picture was an avatar, so no pictures of me on the account. And as a location, I said Paris because I lived in the suburbs. I didn't have many followers, 20 or maybe 30, and I didn't follow that many people either, so my timeline wasn't really interesting. One evening in October, someone sent me quite a strange direct message. It was a 200 followers account, and the message was, "Hi, my name is Rob and I just turned 17. And wanted to know if you lived in Redacted, because I will soon move in and go to the town high school, and I'm looking for more friends." Redacted was obviously the town that I lived in. I immediately thought something was wrong because there was nowhere on my profile that I said where I actually lived. But after some time thinking, I remembered of a tweet I made weeks ago about buses, and I mentioned the city, so I told myself he just looked up for Redacted and found my tweet. His age wasn't shocking because I'm 2 years ahead of my classmates. I was bored and he was polite and I answered him. I told him I indeed lived in Redacted and go to high school there. The discussion was natural, and we talked a lot that night, mainly about high school, about the food at the cafeteria, about the teachers, that kind of thing. But as it was getting very late, he tried to interpose some personal questions, like, do you live far away from the school? In a house or in an apartment? Do you live with both of your parents? Is there 5 of you? You're not often home alone, right? I never answered because it was way too shady for me, and unfortunately, he didn't insist. Unfortunately, because if he did, I would have probably blocked him. The next day, the same thing. We talked a lot and he was still asking personal questions, just to get to know me better, and so I asked him too. He always answered with what seemed like honesty. I still didn't answer the questions about my house though, because he didn't need to know anything. It lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to develop feelings for him. He was handsome, super kind, and it was everything that I needed. Because I had been bullied for years and even today, I still develop strong feelings but most importantly, blind trust in people who are friendly to me. In France in October, we have a 2-week-long vacation, and the day before back to school day, he finally told me that he was coming to my high school because he finally moved in with his mom, and he asked me a place to meet during the morning break. I was so happy and relieved to be able to finally meet him, and I told him to just join me in the hall. But when he understood that there would be people around, he said he would prefer an isolated place because he was afraid he would not recognize me, and he didn't want to spend the break looking for me. It was a good excuse for me, so I told him to meet me in the 3rd floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during the breaks, and no one would disturb us. In my head, even though it was a little bit creepy, I was still in school so nothing could happen to me. Next day, back to school day, I made myself pretty. I wore my best clothes, I counted down the minutes, and finally, when break time arrived, I ran to the bathroom and waited. And when he arrived, it was him. He was not a catfish. He looked quite like his profile picture, but I still noticed that he seemed a little bit older than he had told me. I thought 20 years old instead of 17. We talked a lot, we got along well. I was so pleased, and at the end of the break, he asked me to go to the fast food with him for lunch. I said no because I didn't have any money, and I always refuse for people to pay for me. It's a principle. He seemed disappointed, but offered to walk me home after classes. I explained that I had to take the bus, but that he could walk me to the bus stop. He looked disappointed again, but he finally accepted. And that's exactly what happened. It was so great that it quickly became some kind of routine. We met in the 3rd floor bathroom during the morning break, and he walked me to the bus stop after classes. Surprising fact, I never saw him in the hallways nor at the cafeteria. But I thought that at the time that the building was huge and that there were over 1,500 students in there. So if our schedules didn't coincide, there was no way that we could meet each other. This little game lasted until December, so almost a month and a half. The 14th of December, a Thursday, I complained about how lonely I was going to be that evening, because my dad was abroad for work, and my brother was always at his friend's house. My little sis was on a school trip, and my mom had to work late that very night. It was very reckless of me, but after weeks, I thought I could trust him. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. We both waited. I got on the bus, waved at him, and put on my earphones. I had 2 stops before my house, and it was about 5:45 in December, so it was already really dark outside. And as I got out of the bus, I had a really bad feeling. There was that very uncomfortable sensation on my stomach, and I felt like I was being observed. I pressed pause on my music, but I kept my earphones on, so that people thought I couldn't hear anything. And that's probably what saved my life. I lived in a suburban neighborhood, very silent, especially at night. with no visibility on the big road the buses passed in. When I heard footsteps behind me, I understood that I was right. There was someone following me, and he was not well-intentioned. At least, I could tell that he wasn't accelerating, so he wasn't trying to catch up to me, but I couldn't guess how long that it would last. As quietly as possible, I tried to reach for my keys in my pocket, and when I finally pulled them out, I ran. As fast as I could. The best sprint of my life. I don't know how it worked, but I managed to open and to close the door before he could reach me. I then deactivated my alarm, which, by the way, confirmed that I was home alone, and took a look through the glass panel on the door. It is not a peephole, it's a whole window, so if somebody wanted to see what's happening inside, they can. It was Rob, a few meters away, looking at me with a really creepy face. He followed me to my home, probably with a car, and he was clearly not here for chit-chat. I still don't know why I didn't call the police. I was totally paralyzed. We both stared at each other for a minute, and when I took back control of my body, I ran into the kitchen to get a knife, and I got back to the door. He was there too, banging against the door. I feared for a second that the glass would break, but it didn't happen. That moment, when I was pushing against the door, praying for it not to break while he was kicking harder and harder, was the longest I've ever experienced. After maybe 5 minutes, he stopped and got around the house, knocking against every shutter, and got back to the door. He looked very angry, but then my neighbor's car reached my house and Rob ran away, probably thinking that it was my mom coming home. On Twitter, Rob sent me 1,000 messages before I could block him. He then deleted his account, and I thought that I was done with this story. But quickly after, some accounts which had just been created followed me. Their @names were all a series of numbers and the first letter of his name. And as soon as I blocked one, another one would follow me. I chose to delete my account because I couldn't make it stop, and it was too hard to endure because they were sending me dozens of insulting direct messages. Later, I talked to the people who were supposed to be Rob's classmates, because I haven't met him again in days, but not a single one ever heard about Rob. This guy was never a student in my high school, and this is why I never met him apart from our daily meetings. That's probably why he seemed so old. I never heard about him anymore, and I'm still asking myself, what did he want, and what could have happened that night? So Rob, let's never meet again. For background information, I'm female and on a volunteer fire department, and this happened a few years ago when I was 20. During our drills at my former department, our bay doors are open so people have been known to walk by and talk to us, ask us questions, or just look at the trucks. One evening, this dude, a 23-year-old male, strolls by. A fellow firefighter from another town, which isn't uncommon. Firemen stop by other departments all the time when in town. He made his rounds and was talking to my chief, my captain, the young guys, and he made his way over to me and started chatting me up. He was a nice guy and good looking enough, and we exchanged Snapchats. And it didn't take long to figure out what a psycho he was. After a week of talking, he messaged me saying, "So, how come you didn't swipe right?" Confused, I asked him what he meant, and then this unfolded. He told me that all of this was an attempt to impress me with how devoted he was. He had found me on a dating app, used my picture from the dating app to find my Facebook, since in one photo I'm wearing a uniform that had my last name. He then used my profile picture to find what fire department I was on by looking closely at the fire truck in the background. He told me that he walked by my department almost every day to see when we drilled and to spot me. As he's telling me this, I'm confused as heck, and he goes, "I'm having a pretty rough day. Is it okay if I can come over?" Cue to him telling me he's on his way. He used my Snapchat location to find my work and house. My location on everything is now off. When he came to my house, he brought a love letter and gifts. He said that he was sorry and confused and he just really wanted things to work out. I told him that he needed to leave and never speak to me again, to which he obliged by leaving, saying if it would make me happy. He made maybe 3 or 4 new Snapchats and Facebook profiles in an attempt to add me back. At one point he got clever and made his Snapchat name Chris Smith 1990, which made me go, hey, it's my friend Chris Smith. And lo and behold, it wasn't Chris Smith. Once I realized it wasn't my friend, but instead the psycho, he asked what I could do to make it up. I texted, get lost and go set yourself on fire. I then got a video of him walking in the woods and then he set himself on fire. He flickered a light over his hand and thought, yeah, okay. And then his entire hand and arm lit up, followed by screaming, and it cut out. I started to freak out thinking, oh crap, and immediately got a photo of the hairs on his knuckles burnt off and his burnt shirt. He was okay and he had coated his arm in something flammable, but something that wouldn't actually damage him. So I blocked him again. He messed off after coming to my house again, and I had a gun in my hand and told him to stop or the cops would be involved. But to be fair, it wasn't loaded. I didn't know how to use it and was planning on swinging the thing if it got really bad. So, crazy stalker who set himself ablaze. Let's not meet.